Hi, welcome to Nomad Boatbuilding. I'm Mark Rudin, and today on Building Gannet, we're going to tackle what I consider to be the most fun and satisfying part of the entire project, and that is setting up the building jig. So I got all my planking stock scarfed, got the glue cleaned up, gave them a quick little sand. We got all of our molds ready to go. There's nothing left for me to do but set up the building jig. So I'll just start at the back and start working my way forward. We're just going to align these molds to the center line, screw them in place, and then we're going to spend a bit of time plumbing them up and bracing them. Now, if I was really smart, which I was not this time around, I would have made sure that I had some blocking on each mold that was consistent in height, that I could just fasten a batten to easily. Sometimes I just use the keelson itself that we put on to do that job for me. That might work pretty good in this case because we got a pretty flat keelson for the most part. If it's got a lot of crown to it, if there's a lot of rocker in the boat, as you bend that down, it can sort of affect the plumb of the mold. So I don't always like to use that method. I think it might work out okay in this case, so maybe I'll just go ahead and do that. What I want to do right now is just start stacking them up and screwing them down. Now I want to make sure that I've got the correct face against the correct side of my cleats. That's very important. So in the aft portion of the boat, I need to put these molds aft of the cleat, and my reference face is on the back side. That means that the larger part of the boat lands on the waist side of the mold, if that makes any sense. Just start by clamping them in place. What I love about this part of the project is in a very short amount of time, we have big results. This is when all the effort you put in at the lofting stage, when you're making the molds, when you're building the strong back, it all comes together in a very satisfying way. This is also the stage at which you finally get to realize the real scale, proportion, and shape of the boat. You get a good idea of it when you're lofting, but that's still two-dimensional. Now it's three-dimensional, and you really get to feel that. This is the part of the project where my students would often use the expression, "It's starting to look like a boat." I find that expression a little irritating for some reason, but I will give them that. This truly is when it is finally starting to look like a boat. This boat's so wide, I can't reach the other side to tap this thing both ways if I need to. I started out my career as an artist and industrial designer, and I was also interested in sculpture, but I like to work at a slightly larger scale sometimes. That's really not practical as an artist unless you've got a market for it. And for me, it was the craft was the more important thing, not an artistic vision. So when I discovered boat building, it really took all the skills that I had as an artist and industrial designer, brought it all into one package that really satisfied me, and it still does. From a practical point of view, it's still a sculpture, but it's something that has some use. It doesn't just sit statically. Now, I have done a few boats that are just for display, and I'm fine with that. I enjoy doing that. It allows me to produce a boat that is not necessarily built entirely to withstand the rigors of being on the water, although I usually try and build them such that they could, because you never know what's going to happen with something that's hanging on a wall or from a ceiling. Someone might decide to throw it in the water one day. But in general, boat building is just a great way to express yourself. Even when you're working with someone else's design, there are so many elements of the construction process that require your personal touch, your sense of taste and proportion. And no boat building plan ever has all the answers drawn into the plan. Quite often, there are areas that you need to figure out. And so that's where innovation comes into play. And of course, there's just the challenge of trying to build this very organically shaped thing with products that are usually not organically shaped to start with. They're manufactured into rectilinear objects. and we need to transform those into roundish objects. And that's really where the fun comes into it for me. If you're watching this channel, you're probably interested in trying boat building for yourself if you haven't already, and I encourage you to do so. I suggest you just start at a small scale, do some model making. That's a great way to learn. And then when you're ready to build a full-size boat, start with something small again, something small and simple for your first try. Even a small, simple project will deliver valuable lessons to you that you can apply to a larger project later on. If you join me over on Patreon, at the $5 sponsorship level and up, you'll receive a free set of plans for my forest and stream model skiff. It's a great little project to get you started in wooden boat building, give you a sort of taste for the thinking process you need to go through for building any sort of boat. And if Patreon isn't for you, you can go over to my website and purchase that same set of plans for $5. You can find links in the corner or down in the description. Either way helps to support this channel and helps me to continue making videos for your education and pleasure. I think I might stop and quickly do my bracing because it's usually the center mold that I'll brace. And right now I can just get in here easier than if I put the other molds in. Now I gotta kind of squeeze between them to do the work that I need to do. So I'll take a moment to do my bracing. Okay, for bracing, I'll typically just start by clamping a level onto the mold here. Give myself something to reference, and I've got a stick on the back that's going to be my brace. So I just want to play around with it and see if I can find the right positioning for the stick. I might just make this temporary, then grab a different one and fit it differently. Right there looks pretty good. Okay, because these are so wide, I'll brace both sides of it, I think. There we go. Good. Now it should be apparent why I didn't want to set these molds up until the last possible moment. Suddenly this boat takes up all the space in the shop. All right, now the very last one. Right. Yep, this one had to go on a little different. Just want to make sure 100%. Yep, okay. Okay, now to just brace it all together. Think about this for a moment. I think I'll put a batten in here and just spring it up into place and see how it looks. See if it'll work or if I need to fudge around with some blocking. I would have to notch down into here in order to fasten it from the top, which isn't the end of the world, but it means farting around with a multi-master, which I don't really feel like doing. Okay, I got an idea. I just need to add a little bit of blocking on a couple of these and we'll be good. Normally I would often notch the tops of the molds and lay a stringer in there in order to connect all these molds together. I didn't do that in this case because I was working from a set of plans that didn't specify that sort of detail. So I guess I'm just kind of rolling with the punches on this. I'm having to add a little bit of blocking to make the stringer work, but that's okay. It's really not slowing me down more than a few moments. Okay, so the basic idea is you've got one plumbed up, and then you put a batten in here that the other ones can fasten to, and you plumb all of these up accordingly. Now I could plumb them, or I could use measurements from one to the next, which might not be a terrible way to go. So in theory that should be plumb. And I'm going to check it out this side. Yep, that works. Now the only trouble is my clamp is right in my way. So mark the stick, drill it. There we go. All right, there we go. There's our building jig set up. So that should work just fine. Everything's plumb. It's all secure enough. A little wobble's no big deal for the way we're using it. So now to put the backbone onto it, which consists of the stem, the keelson, and the transom. I don't remember if I got all the notches the right width for the keelson because I think I did, but I might have screwed one up or two, so I got to play around with that a little bit. The transom we should be able to just drop right into its supports that we've got built back there. And then the stem, of course, we need to take some of this blocking away for the stem to drop on. But before I put the stem in place, I just want to check my plans and see if there's like a trailering eye or something that's going to go into it. This might be a good time to actually pre-drill for that, but no, because I got the inner and outer stem. Maybe I'll save that for doing the outer stem. I'll drill through there. Yeah. We'll do that. Okay. We're done with the center line, possibly. Better leave the center line in place, get the transom on first, and then when we do the stem, I don't need it. So, transom next. I always leave my transoms proud and square on the edge so that I can fasten it to transom supports like this. Because I find it's easier to just screw them on than it is to try and worry about making a support that conforms to a contour of a transom crown. And sometimes you might want to tweak how the transom looks when the boat's finished, so I prefer to do it this way. Now I just need to plumb up from my centerline string onto the transom to get it centered. Here we go. Now we'll just screw that on. We're ready for our keelson. All right, I no longer need my string line. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. And now my stem should just drop right on there. Looks pretty good. Of course, it never fits on your first try. And often your second. And sometimes even your third. This was probably my fourth. And that's quite good enough for epoxy construction. Now I still need to complete the backbone by gluing and screwing the keelson to the stem and the transom, but for the most part that's it for the building jig, and now we get to feel the real size and shape of the boat. Now you see my keelson wasn't fitting those notches perfectly, so there's a few spots where I've used some shims or little bits of blocking to help tweak it into the right position. Nothing wrong with that, that's part of the game. And our next job will be fairing in the backbone to accept the planking. So that's it for today's video, but before we go, I just want to thank everybody out there who watches these videos, and especially my followers on Patreon, whose financial support makes these videos possible. So I hope you join me again next time on Building Gannet, and until then, let's stick together and stay strong. See you later, folks.